Kata on opening the sutra.
Blue Cliff Record, Case 60. Master Yunmen's staff changes into a dragon. A pointer. Buddhas and sentient beings, fundamentally, there is no difference between them. Mountains and rivers and one's own self, how could there be any distinction? Why then is it all divided into yin and yang? Even if you can set words turning and occupy the essential bridge, still it won't do to let go. And yet, if you don't let go, the whole great earth isn't worth grasping. But what is the place to set words turning? To cite, I test this old case. The main case. Master Yunmen showed his staff to the assembly and said, the staff has changed into a dragon and swallowed the entire universe. Mountains, rivers, the great earth. Where do they come from? This case is smack in the middle of the Blue Cliff Record, which is a very important collection of koan. It's brought to us in our lineage. Master Dogen himself, it is said, when he traveled to China in the 13th century, on the eve after he had received transmission and was set to return to his homeland of Japan to spread the Dharma, suddenly realized, oh, these are nice. I should copy these down. And he spent through the night copying the Blue Cliff Record of koans and brought them with him. And so in the Soto Reform koan system, which we're a part of, the Blue Cliff Record was inserted. And in our training, still the same today, we use this collection of koan right after a student passes through the Gateless Gate collection. It's very central. And as I say to folks, this collection has a very different flavor to it. It's obviously pointing to the same thing all koans inevitably point to, and yet there's a subtlety and a nuance in the Blue Cliff that's well worth the effort. Buddhas and sentient beings, fundamentally, there is no difference between them. Seems clear enough. And yet, why is it that awakening is such a big deal? Of course, one of the ironic things we realize is that we've been it the whole time. But do we really see it? It's a great, should be fuel, I would think. Certainly was for me. The fact that the teachings are constantly pointing to the fact that you're already it, just this, here we are. And yet somehow just this never seems quite enough. And why doesn't this seem to apply to me in the midst of my life? I mean, after all, look at my life, ... And ironically, no matter how old I was, whether I was in a period of great triumph or decimation or just kind of blah, it didn't matter. It always seemed to be true. It really isn't enough to simply understand intellectually. There's something else that has to happen. Something else that makes this real. In other words, that we actually realize for ourselves. There are some teachers or traditions, I should say, or approaches to Dharma, especially seems to me modern ones, that seem to just really have no interest whatsoever in actually stress testing anyone's awakening. Or rather simply say, we're all it. It's all just this. Lovely, lovely. I don't think that really helps. I think that approach can make perhaps a good feeling for a moment. Maybe we can convince ourselves that we've got this. But really, when the test comes, when the stress is applied, what about then? I mean, after all, the Buddha himself, it's very clear he went through years of inquiry and training and study. And the lineage of masters, no less, in fact, quite a bit more as a rule. Buddhas and sentient beings. Fundamentally, there is no difference between them. Mountains and rivers in one's own self. How could there be any distinction? Why then is everything divided into two sides? If everything is one, like the bumper sticker says, why is yin a complementary antagonism to yang? Why is it then that the mountains are high and the rivers are low if everything is one? What is this one that everything is supposedly supposed to be anyway? I mean, isn't that what we do? We realize sentient beings and everything is all one, and yet sentient beings suffer in a very real way. We suffer in a very real way. The ones we love, the ones we disdain, no different. So if everything is just this one Buddha nature, why am I sitting here and not you? Why are you here and not elsewhere? Why is the sun hot? Even if you can set turning words and occupy the essential, still, it won't do to just let go. And that's ironic because you hear letting go a lot in Zen training. In what place would it be that letting go won't do? And yet, if you don't let go, then the whole great earth isn't worth grasping. All of the treasures and joys and pleasures and delights turn to dust, bitter, ashen dust, if you don't know how to let go. Which one of these is right? Is it that it won't do to let go, or is it that you must let go? Would someone please tell me what the hell to do? How am I supposed to be? How am I supposed to practice? How am I supposed to realize? Would you just fucking tell me? So, what is it to have turning words? Turning words, live words. This is a term in the lineage for speech that is literally alive. And it means it's live to the heart, radiant to the heart, radiant to the Dharma eye. Intellect, not so much. But live turning words that actually can bring power. In the midst of such massive confusion and entanglements, such brambles and challenges, sentient beings and Buddhas the same, all is one, and yet mountains are high and rivers are low, and you this place of the essential it will not do to let go. But of course, if you don't let go, the whole world is just nothing for you, and it's not right. In the midst of such entanglements, yeah, and you thought you had problems, right? But in the midst of such entanglements, which hopefully are not as esoteric sounding as they might seem at first glance, what about a turning word? Please, please, a lifeline. Well, as an example, I cite this old case. Yunmen showed his staff to the assembly and said, "This staff has changed into a dragon and swallowed the entire universe. Mountains, rivers, the great earth, where do they come from?" See? All clear. Yunmen shows his staff. Of course, you can understand there's this temple's staff. Whoever's the unfortunate soul to be abbot gets to schlep that thing around, right? And there's always a staff in any actual place of training, and it's actually no small thing to wield a staff. So it's an abbot who grabs the staff and holds it up. So, in order to help people mired in entangling vines and complications, the doctor holds up a mass of entanglement and complications. He holds up his staff. He could have stopped right there, fighting fire with fire. But no, he adds even more to this fine mess. And he says, "This staff has changed into a dragon." What? This staff has changed into a dragon. Perhaps you think, well, what change? Why the need for change? And what is this dragon business? Now, something to know, a little cultural footnote that may be of use. This is not the evil Smog who hoards treasure and is, the Western European tradition of the evil dragon. Dragons, in the tradition we come from, are awakened ones. You, dear one, dragon, right? A Buddha is a dragon. A sentient being is a snake. And of course, they're not different. But a snake is a snake, and a dragon is something quite else. Ironically, sometimes you may not know when you're confronting a dragon. and sometimes it's inescapably clear that you are. But getting back to Yunmen's maneuver, he holds up his staff and says, "This staff has changed into a dragon." And if that weren't miraculous enough, and it is, he further says, "And this dragon has swallowed the entire universe." What can swallow the entire universe? I mean, our finest telescope is still discovering beyond the bounds of our current knowledge. I have no reason to think that that will ever stop. There's always boundlessness, more. Oh my gosh, it's amazing. I do hope you're keeping up with the James Webb insights and science. It's amazing. It's really amazing. And yet, the claim is made that Yunmen held up the staff and said, "This staff has become a dragon, and it has swallowed the entire universe." Has he just lost his mind? Has he been up on that high seat a little too long? Or is something else happening here? Is this what turning words can be? He goes on, mountains, rivers, the great earth. Where do they come from? And this question is a very piercing one. What is the source of these mountains, of these rivers, of the mind that perceives them? The source of the stick and the dragon and the sentient being and the Buddha, and you yourself, the universe. There's a lot packed into that little moment. But to be able to appreciate it, to be able to really see with the same eye as old Master Yunmen, a casual glance will not do. A mild interest out of curiosity's sake simply will not get you in the house. To be able to see with old Yunmen's eye, you have to be willing to really throw yourself into the project. Fully, completely. At times. Like this, like Sesshin. And you know that. I know you do. Because here you are. Maybe even if you're a little bit kicking and screaming about it, still you know. It's rather like that scene in The Matrix, I think, where Neo's in the car, and I don't know if you can remember this or if I'm just totally outdated, but he's in the car, and the Trinity is there, and they're driving, and he's like, no, I got to get out. And they open the door and say, "Go back if you want." And there's that rainy alley, you know, and you know what's down there. And it doesn't work for you. And Neo had to make the choice to stay on the journey. And it's not obvious how this is all going to work out. And that's part of it. That's necessary. We would really like to have everything mapped out. And we would really like to have everything nice and clear to, you know, solve an issue or two, and then the sails are just set and it's smooth because we were a good little person and we did the right thing. And no. It doesn't work that way. I know you've noticed. And yet there is a way to set yourself in the situation where awakening can occur. And you have to be willing to trust this organic human process. I mean, the rows are straight. The roles are clear. The gatha is set out for us. But actually, there's a whirlwind of churn and drama and chaos and breakthrough and stuckness right here. Is there not? Trust that. Really trust that. It doesn't look some other way. It's not that you practice with great purity and you levitate and your feet no longer touch the ground. Horseshit. Not the case. What use to the world would you be if your feet didn't touch it? Rather, understand the staff. Realize the staff turning into the dragon. And the dragon swallowing the entire cosmos, leaving nothing outside. But say, there's still these mountains and rivers. What about them? Even in the belly of the dragon. We have some comments that might help. Yunmen showed his staff to the assembly and said, the note says, he exposes and transforms according to the occasion. The single-edged sword that kills, the double-edged sword that brings life. And this is what the Buddha does. This is what the teacher does. This is what the lineage did. Rising in a way to meet the circumstance. There's a quality to the mind that's stuck in samsara that is absolutely fixed on this is how I am, this is how you need to be, this is how the world is supposed to be, I've got this figured out, don't mess with me. And of course, the world messes with you. Durr. Because we fundamentally are not aligned with reality. Dear one, if you think that you've got it all figured out and you're a permanent fixed self and everything's nice and clear, just wait. Not long, I promise. The wait will not be long. And suddenly it's all upside down and left has become right and the mountains are flat and the rivers are on the sky. And oh my God, what is this? And good for you. You're doing great. So old Master Yunmen exposes himself, exposes his heart, exposes his practice, his true reality, and transforms according to the occasion. This is the important point. The awakened mind can meet the moment that they're in, that it's in, the way a mirror reflects perfectly what's happening. With no ego or agenda, simply clear mirroring, clear presence. He said, the staff has changed to a dragon. The note says, what's the use of all this talk? I like that note. What is the use of this talk? I wonder. The dragon has swallowed the entire universe. The note says, even the world's patchrobe monks could not preserve their lives. Even the shining holy ones. I'll go further. Even the ancestors in the lineage and the Buddha himself cannot save his life. Why is that? Mountains, rivers in the great earth. Where do they come from? Question from before is, Reverend, where will you go to settle your body and establish your life? This is a worthy question. In a universe swallowed by the dragon, where will you go? How will you establish your life? Where do the mountains and rivers come from? The note says, in all the 10 directions there are no walls. On the 4 sides there are no gates. East, west, south, north, the 4 intermediate points above and below. How will you handle this one? And that's a very serious thing. This is pointing to an impenetrable, a boundary that's uncrossable. How will you cross it? How will you know what is not knowable? Really? How will you realize yourself? I really don't care about the staff, I care about you. When will you awaken as the dragon you are and give that dragon life? It's easy to simply say, everything is it, all is one, there, we're good. Shall we have tea? But to actually realize the truth of the Buddha Dharma takes no less than everything, all of you. And I encourage you, if you can find the edges where you're holding back, consider yourself lucky. The most challenging thing is when you can't, when you don't see it, when you don't realize when you're off point or when you're not really engaged. When you know you're messing up, no worries. You can work with that. And so once in a while, the teacher will help make it clear for you out of great generosity and kindness. A kindness that I've received from my teacher many times. You know, it's a miraculous thing Yunmen did. It really is, holding up his staff. But then again, it's a miraculous thing to hear about it. It's a miraculous thing to exist. It's a miraculous thing to hear the wind outside. To feel life, to die. You're living and you're dying anyway. The question is, can you realize it? Now, part of this mysterious, chaotic, and messy process is that there are barrier gates. There are rites of passage. There are moments of breaking through into yourself, which is what this whole thing's about. Moments of letting go of yourself, which is what this whole thing's about. And those need to be taken seriously and engaged with heartfelt sincerity, or else the magic simply won't take. Because really the magic is you. The magic is your own heart, your own quality of attention and intention. the feeling that you bring, that you are, that you express. It's not a matter of collecting badges and credentials as much as they're good for certain things. It's not about, leveling up and being recognized in some way. And yet, there comes time to be recognized. Without that, the Dharma can't be transmitted. Sure. Sentient beings and Buddhas are the same. And yet, the Buddha transmitted to Mahakasyapa and not Ananda. Why? Did he not like Ananda's choice in the color of tie that he wore that day? I guarantee that wasn't it. It's said that in one of the Buddha's early incarnations, a story, Dimbakara Buddha was the Buddha of that age. And who would become Shakyamuni Buddha, this was 100,000 lifetimes earlier, something like that. He was at that time a great, powerful yogi. He could levitate, and he could walk on water, and he had all the ascetic practices down, and he had the magic mojo and flying carpets and all the rest, crystal balls. Very powerful, shaman powerful. But he heard that the Buddha was coming through. So he levitated up and saw the Buddha's caravan, and he landed. And he was in sort of a phase where it was loincloth and dreadlocks. That was kind of his gig at the time, right? And when he saw the Buddha of that world system in that time, his heart was so opened. And he realized that even though he had all this amazing stuff he could pull off, he was still trapped in suffering, even though he just levitated over, so the tale goes. And so what he did is he took his amazing and impressive dreadlocks and he flung it on the ground so that as the Buddha of that world system would pass, his feet would be spared from the mud. It's an amazing act of generosity and care. And it was a spontaneous maneuver. It wasn't premeditated. It was just from the sincerity of his heart. Certain traditions would point out the fact that in the hair is kept the power and blah, blah, who knows. Anyway, it means he was awestruck and realized for all his attainments, they didn't help. And what's very interesting is the Buddha of that age, Dimbakara Buddha, he stopped and he looked at this yogi, this master, and he said, I predict that one day you will realize full and complete Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. You will become Buddha and you will realize freedom and be a great teacher to many. It is so. Just on seeing him and feeling, there was a connection there. And he said to his attendant, a temple should be built on this spot. His attendant, whose name we don't know, grabbed a blade of grass and said, yes, master, and set the blade of grass on that spot. Here's the temple. It is built. Isn't that an interesting story? A blade of grass, a temple, cool superpowers, suffering, a staff, a dragon, swallowing the entire cosmos. And most importantly, you. What about you? how will you wield Yunmen's staff? How will you realize the truth of yourself, your own Buddha nature? Sesshin's a good start. Buddhas and sentient beings, fundamentally, there is no difference between them. Mountains and rivers and one's own self, how could there be any distinction? Why then is it all divided into yin and yang? Even if you can set up turning words and occupy the essential, it still won't do to let go. And yet, if you don't let go, the whole great earth isn't worth grasping. But what is it? What is the place to set up turning words? To cite, I test this old case. Listen, listen. The main case. Zen Master Yunmen showed his staff to the assembly and said, "This staff has changed into a dragon and swallowed the universe, mountains, rivers, and the great earth. Where do they come from?" May we all realize it. For the sake of all beings, may it be so.
The Kinhin Trail is closed. During this next period, please, is there anyone that could volunteer to lead a body practice? What I'd ask is, this is not a rest practice. You could walk on the porch here, going round and round, or do stretches, or if someone wants to lead Nigong, anybody? And if not, then please practice your own body practice, something to energize your body. Thank you.